Imagine being trapped on a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. No food, no water. Just 4 men slowly starving to death. Now imagine this. 3 of them survive, but 1 doesn't. And finally, when they are rescued, the survivors are put on trial for murder. Not for killing an enemy, not for self-defense, but for killing the weakest among them so that the others could eat. And the question that shocked Victorian England was simple. Is it murder if it is the only way to survive? This is the disturbing true story behind one of the most famous cases in legal history, R versus Dudley and Stephens. Before we dive in, I am Achachi, and on this channel I bring you real life court cases and shocking stories to life, exploring the human drama behind the headlines. The voyage that will change everything began with a small yacht called the Mignonette. It was barely 52 feet long. Tiny for the journey ahead, yet it had been purchased by an Australian owner and needed to be delivered all the way to Sydney. 4 men agreed to take the job. First was the captain, Tom Dudley. He was 31 years old, a respected sailor from Southampton. At home, he had a wife and children. Beside him was his trusted friend and first mate, Edwin Stephens. Stephens was quieter than Dudley, more reserved. He too had a wife waiting for him at home. Men like Stephens rarely became famous. They simply worked hard. Dangerous work that most people on land will never understand. The third crew member was Edmund Brooks. Brooks had spent years at sea. He was tough and practical, but unlike the others, Brooks was unmarried, and later during the trial, he will become the most complicated figure in the entire story. Because Brooks survived the lifeboat, but refused to fully justify what had happened there. And finally, there was the youngest member of the crew, a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. Parker's life had not been easy. He was an orphan, no parents, no safety net. For boys like him in Victorian England, the sea offered something rare, a chance to earn money, a chance to build a future. The Mignonette left England in May 1884. At first, the journey seemed ordinary. The men worked long days maintaining the yacht. They joked, they shared meals. Young Parker worked hard to impress the crew. Like many teenagers eager to prove themselves, he wanted to be seen as useful. But thousands of miles from home, the ocean had other plans. On July 5th, a powerful storm swept across the South Atlantic. Waves crashed violently against the small yacht. The Mignonette was simply too small to withstand the sea. A massive wave struck the vessel. The hull cracked. Water rushed in. Captain Dudley knew immediately the ship was sinking. And it was sinking fast. There was no time to send distress signals, no time to prepare. The men grabbed whatever they could. 2 tins of turnips, a few instruments, and a small 13-foot dinghy. Within minutes, the Mignonette vanished beneath the ocean, leaving 4 men alone on a tiny boat, surrounded by nothing but water. At first, the men stayed calm. They divided the turnips carefully, each man taking tiny portions, trying to stretch them as long as possible. Then something incredible happened. They spotted a sea turtle floating nearby. After a struggle, they managed to capture it. The turtle saved them temporarily. They drank its blood, they ate its flesh. For a few days, hunger eased. But the relief didn't last. Soon the turtle was gone, and the men were starving again. As the days dragged on, thirst became unbearable. The human body can survive longer without food than without water. Their lips split, their tongues swelled. Their thoughts became confused. Then the youngest among them made a terrible mistake. Richard Parker drank seawater. Experienced sailors know this is deadly. Salt water accelerates dehydration and causes severe illness. The others warned him. They begged him not to drink it. But Parker was young, desperate, and delirious. He drank it anyway. Within hours, he was violently sick, so he could barely move. He lay at the bottom of the boat, growing weaker each day. By the second week, the men were close to death. They hadn't eaten in days. Rescue seemed impossible, and that's when Captain Dudley mentioned something sailors had whispered about for generations: the custom of the sea. In extreme situations, starving sailors sometimes drew lots, a kind of lottery. Whoever lost would be sacrificed so the others could live. It was brutal, but history showed it had happened before. Then men discussed it quietly. Should they draw lots? Should fate decide? But something strange happened. They never actually did. No straws, no cards, no lottery. Instead, they looked at the dying cabin boy. Richard Parker was unconscious, delirious, already close to death. Captain Dudley began arguing that sacrificing Parker might save the others. 3 men with families could live instead of 4 men dying. Brooks objected. He didn't want to participate, but he didn't physically stop them either. Days passed. No rescue, no ships, no hope. Finally, the decision was made. On July 25th, after nearly 3 weeks drifting, Captain Dudley leaned over the boy. He whispered a short prayer, then he drove a knife into Parker's throat. The starving men collected the blood, they drank it, and over the following days, they ate the body. It kept them alive just long enough, because 4 days later, a ship appeared on the horizon. In Dudley's diary, he later recorded, "On the 24th day, as we were having our breakfast, a ship appeared at last." A German vessel spotted a tiny boat. The survivors were brought aboard, weak, emancipated, barely able to stand. They had survived the Atlantic. But when they returned to England, their stories spread rapidly. Victorian newspapers exploded. Headlines screamed, "Cannibalism at sea, cabin boy killed for food." The public reaction was explosive. Some people sympathized with the sailors. Others believed a helpless boy had been murdered. Soon the authorities stepped in. Captain Dudley and Dudley Stephens were arrested. The case became one of the most difficult questions in legal history. Could killing someone ever be justified if it meant survival? The defense argued the men had acted out of necessity. Without Parker's death, everyone would have died. But there was something deeper behind all of this. If killing can be justified by necessity, then survival becomes a choice. Who lives? Who dies? And that means deciding whose life matters more. The court rejected the defense of necessity. It could not entertain the killing of an innocent person, even in extreme situations. Because once you start comparing lives, you destroy the idea that they are equal. And so, the court reached its conclusion. Necessity is not a defense. Captain Dudley and Dudley Stephens were found guilty, but public sympathy for them remained strong. Many believed the men had faced an impossible choice, so their death sentence were reduced. Instead, they served 6 months in prison. The case of Dudley and Stephens is a leading legal precedent, and it is still taught in law schools around the world. Because it forces us to confront a terrifying question. If survival demands life, should the law ever allow it? Imagine you are in that lifeboat, starving, watching death approach. Would you follow the law, or would you do whatever it takes to survive? Let me know in the comments, because sometimes the most difficult legal questions begin with ordinary people trapped in impossible situations.
You and me, when the court is in session and I am walking and the gavel is echoing, the voice is talking. As the truth unfolds, a voice is chanting. This court was made for you and me.